Do you use the basement much? The woman holding the packaging tape froze momentarily. Her husband looked up from the dining room table where he'd been sorting papers into stacks. Neither of them answered right away. I remember noticing stupid details because of the pause. A lamp already unplugged and leaning against the wall. Blue painter's tape on the banister where they labeled things for the movers. The smell of cardboard and dust, and that faint, sharp smell old houses get when too many rooms are open at once. Then the husband said, "No, not really." He said it casually, but not in a casual way, like he'd chosen the shortest answer available. I nodded like it didn't matter. "I grew up here," he said. "I was just curious if it was still the same." The woman set the tape down on the box. "Mostly," she said. "We finished some things after we moved in, just cosmetic." Her voice was friendly. Her face wasn't. I looked past them toward the hallway door that led to the stairs. It was closed. When I was a kid, it was usually open unless company was over. Would it be weird if I took a look down there before? Just for a minute? Another pause. Not long, but long enough. The husband gave a small smile that didn't quite attach to anything. "You want to see the basement?" He said basement the way people say injury. Not afraid of the word, just careful around it. I should probably explain why I was there at all. I hadn't driven down that street in years. I tell myself it was accidental, but it wasn't. I'd been in the neighborhood for a work appointment and had 15 minutes before I needed to be somewhere else. I could have taken the main road back. Instead, I cut through the subdivision where I grew up, past the elementary school, past the retention pond, past the row of houses that all looked smaller than I remembered. Our old house was at the end of a shallow curve. One story, shutters, same front steps, different cars in the driveway. There was a pod out in the street, and the garage was open. I could see boxes stacked inside. A hand-lettered sign was against the porch rail, another one that said "sold" outside. I almost kept driving. Instead, I pulled over across the street and sat there longer than I want to admit, looking at the front windows, trying to figure out what exactly I thought that I was looking for. I hadn't been inside since my parents sold it. I don't speak to my father unless I have to. My mother lives in Arizona now and has gotten good at forgetting things that make conversations hard or inconvenient. The house existed in that separate category some places fall into, where they're still arranged in your head exactly the way they were when you were 12, even though you know they aren't. The man came out first, carrying a lamp base. He saw me parked and then gave a quiet, suburban half wave people do when they're not sure if they know you. I got out and told him I used to live here. He was warmer then. Both of them were. They let me stand at the open garage and talk for a minute. "When did your family own it? How long were you there?" Yes, they were relocating for work. Yes, the market had been good, timing wise. Then I mentioned the basement. That was the only point where the air changed. The husband rubbed his thumb against the edge of one of the paper stacks he was loading. The woman looked at the hallway door, then back at me. "It's probably silly," I said. "I haven't seen it since I was a kid. Can I take a look?" The wife gave a quick little laugh, but there wasn't any amusement in it. "We're kind of in the middle of things," she said, as if she hadn't already paused things to talk with me. "I'd only be a second," I said. The husband stood up. "Sure," he said. "You can take a quick look." He said it like he'd already decided something. He led me up the stairs to the hallway door and opened the basement door. It was similar to how I remember it being. The smell came up immediately, cool concrete, detergent, the metallic dust smell furnaces give off in older homes. So specific it reached past everything I've done since and caught me somewhere much younger. The light switch was still on the left. He didn't go down ahead of me. He stood back and let me descend first, one hand on the door frame like he wanted line of sight on the stairs. That registered, but only dimly. The basement now looked smaller than the one in my memory. but exactly as I remembered it feeling. The finished part where my brother and I used to keep a TV in an old couch, the utility section behind it, exposed ductwork, concrete floor where the carpet ended, washer and dryer in the alcove. The wall was still there, not because I had consciously come to see it. I'm not sure I admitted that to myself even then, but my eyes found it immediately, the same way your tongue finds a bad tooth. Foundation wall behind drywall, that section in the storage area, that one stretch I'd seen thousands of times before I understood I wasn't supposed to have seen it at all. There shouldn't have been that many pictures of one wall. I was maybe 11 the night I found the box. My parents had been arguing upstairs. I went downstairs in the basement because it felt quieter than the kitchen. I had tried to drag a banker's box into the open so I could sit on it. The lid came loose. Inside were the photographs. Thousands of them, maybe 7,000 or 8,000 if I had to guess now, taken over months or years of the same section of basement wall from slightly different angles. Tape measures, chalk circles, drywall, seams, primer, paint. Then more of the same wall again. A spiral notebook with measurements repeated and corrected and redrawn. When I asked my mother why there were so many pictures, she told me not to mention it to my father. Weeks later, the box was gone. Years later, she told me she didn't remember any of it. That was the whole story as far as I'd ever let it become. One wrong box in one wrong room, and nobody willing to talk about it. Now I was standing in front of the same wall as an adult, with a stranger 2 steps behind me on the basement stairs. "It's mostly original down here," the man said. "Yeah," I responded. The finished portion looked tired in the way that all finished basements from the 90s do. Nothing dramatic, nothing horror movie wrong. Storage bins against one wall, a folded card table, a dehumidifier in the corner with a hose running to the drain. Then I noticed the paper. It was taped to the edge of a shelf unit in the utility section, half hidden behind a roll of moving wrap. White paper in a cheap plastic sleeve. Not old. New enough that the corners were still flat. It was a permit placard from the county. I crossed over before I thought about whether or not I should. The man came down one more step, watching me. It was a county placard, a county license, black block text, a permit number, a final inspection date, a scope of work. It said structural repair, foundation wall, crack remediation complete, final approved. And there was a signature. I just looked at it for a second. Then I looked up at the wall, the same wall from all of those photographs. There wasn't even a cut line in the drywall. There was no patching, no seam break, no difference in texture. The paint hadn't even been disturbed. I glanced back. When did they open it? The husband stayed where he was, before we bought it. If they opened it, I said, where did they cut? There was a pause. They didn't, he said. Then after a beat, like he was correcting himself, he said, the inspector signed off. That's what matters. That should have settled it. For most people, it probably would have. Instead, it made something cold move through me, because that was the part I recognized. Not the wall, not the basement, not even the specific wrongness of the paperwork. The behavior. The feeling that something had already been turned into procedure long before you arrived. That your confusion was expected, and that the answer being given to you wasn't meant to explain anything, only to move you along to the next approved step. When I was a kid, my mother hadn't asked how many pictures were there after I had found them. She hadn't come downstairs to see the box. She hadn't told me anything more. She just told me not to mention it to my father. Now this man was telling me an inspector had signed off without anyone ever touching the wall. I stepped closer. Can I asked, and touched 2 fingers lightly to the paint near the corner seam before he answered. Actually, he said sharply. It was the first time either of them sounded openly tense. I turned. He was off the stairs now, walking toward me. not close, but no longer pretending not to care. His wife had come down 3 steps from the hallway. They both looked at my hand, not at me. You better not, he said. I lowered it. Sorry. He gave a short nod, then added, We really don't use that section. I looked at the placard again. Final approved. There was a second sheet behind it, mostly obscured. I slid the plastic sleeve aside just enough to read the header. It said supplemental photo documentation received. That was all I could see before the man reached past me and straightened the sleeve back against the shelf. Sorry, he said, we should probably keep packing. Not rude. Worse than rude. Controlled. I said, of course. We went back upstairs together. As we walked up, I glanced over my shoulder one last time at that wall. He closed the basement door as soon as I stepped into the hallway. Not slammed, just closed, firm enough that the latch fully caught. At the front door, the wife thanked me for stopping by. She asked where I live now. I told her. We both acted like the conversation downstairs had been normal. The husband stood a little behind her with one hand on the knob, ready for the last line to be said. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright for a second. The pod door was open. I could hear the rip of more tape from somewhere inside the house. I walked to my car and got in and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel. I should have left. Instead, I pulled out my phone and searched the county permit database. The number from the placard came up immediately. The address matched, the year matched, status was final. Description of work, foundational wall opened for evaluation, repair completed, area closed. There were 3 attachments. The first was the permit application. The second was the sign-off. The third was a PDF labeled Supplemento Photo Documentation. I opened it. The preview took a second to load. White screen, spinning wheel, then a thumbnail grid. Small images, dozens per page. The file was over 200 pages. The same angle, the same wall. I didn't open the full file. I didn't need to. I already knew what it would show me. Not because I could see each image clearly, but because I recognized the structure of it immediately. The repetition, the obsession disguised as record keeping, the same section from slightly different positions again and again, turned into documentation, turned into proof, turned into something official enough for a county file. I closed the PDF and stared at my reflection in the phone screen. Across the street, movers were carrying boxes out through the front door of the house. One of them propped the storm door open with his foot. For a second, I could see straight through the entry hall to the back of the house, past the kitchen, almost to where the basement door would be. Then someone crossed in front and the view is gone. I don't know if the couple had ever opened the file themselves. I just know they knew not to touch that wall. And that might be worse. I put the car in reverse and backed out slowly. At the corner, I looked in the mirror one more time and saw the sold sign leaning against the porch rail, half covered now by a coil of moving blankets. The house was changing hands again. The repair was still listed as complete, and nobody needed to understand it for it to keep working.